Welcome to Inside Bremerton. This is the City of Bremerton's video newsletter, focusing on issues and topics important to its citizens. We are at the Kitsap County History Museum. We're at 284th Street, downtown Bremerton. This institution, this museum, has been around Kitsap County for many, many, many years. But I'd like to introduce you to its executive director, Dean Tingey. Dean has been in our community for about 2 years, coming up on 2 years. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you very much, Shar. Appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. So we are here on 4th Street, and we want to learn about the many facets of this historical history museum. So, Dean, tell us about what people find inside of this building.
Within our building, we have 2 permanent exhibits. The largest one is Kitsap Timeline. It's an overview of Kitsap County history, starting with the late 17th century Native American time.
Nice.
Ending with World War II. And in between that, we have some exhibits featuring logging, agricultural development in Kitsap County. And then we also have just some very interesting different items, artifacts. For example, a safe from the early Kitsap County courthouse.
Yeah, very, very cool things in this museum. Really special for children, adults, folks that love history. Even if you don't love history, if you're new to this community, this is where you need to come. Check it out, learn about the community that you're living in. But Dean, the History Museum does numerous things outside of the museum to draw people in. Events, activities. Let's talk a little bit about those.
That's right. And the reason we do that, even though we have basically a 12,000 square foot building, there's a limit to how much we can put on display. And so, for example, one of our long-running programs is called Eat Your Way Through Kitsap History. That's a program generally 7 times a year. We'll go do a tour of an event, and then we'll have a meal, and a lot of times those meals will tie in with a specific theme. Our most recent Eat Your Way Through Kitsap History program featured repurposed buildings here in downtown Bremerton.
Nice.
The Bremer House, also known as Bremerton's Castle, which is now serving as a tea shop, and then also the former Sears Automotive and Appliance Center, which for the past 5 years or so has been the headquarters of Rice Fergus Miller architectural firm.
Yeah, that is a cool building. The way they have kept some of the old Sears or the store it used to be, it's very, very cool. What are some other upcoming events, Dean?
Well, we have more Eat Your Way Through Kitsap history programs. One of the ones will be going to Fort Ward. Later this year, we're going to be doing a tour of Port Orchard Shore, South Kitsap Shores, and also Blake Island.
Oh, Blake Island. Love that place. Really love that place. To check out these events and learn more about the History Museum, they have a Facebook page. What is the title of that Facebook page? How do they find it?
Our Facebook page is Kitsap County Historical Society Museum, and our Facebook page is really the best way to keep up with us. That's where we post the weekly time capsule, and we will have anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 views a week on our Facebook page. That's also where we post our other programs and events, and that's also where at times we'll be posting things of interest to the general community, not specific to the Historical Society.
Nice, great. We're going to talk about collaboration, but let's talk about some services that the History Museum does. So if you're doing research, if you need assistance, tell us about that.
Right. We have research volunteers, and the research volunteers, along with our staff, are averaging over 500 hours a year in research time. In addition to the research volunteers, we maintain the Kitsap County Register of Historic Sites. We have a small bookstore which focuses on Kitsap County history and delves a little bit into the broader Pacific Northwest County. We have photographic reproduction service. And interestingly enough, out of all of the different archives and artifacts that we have, the only thing that we can really earn any money from are the photo reproduction services.
And I bet those are popular.
They're very popular.
Yeah.
They're very popular, yes. One interesting thing is that we worked for about 3 months with a company that was preparing the decorations for the new ferry coming on board here in Bremerton.
Nice.
And at the end of that period, they ended up purchasing a number of our historic photos. So you will be seeing those when the new ferry comes on service.
Nice. Very, very, very good. Because while Dean's talking, you will see lots of pictures and video footage of downstairs, which is the archival room. What is where everything's stored and all that?
Interestingly enough, my background was not museums. I'm a retired banker, so I myself am still learning. But what we have are artifacts. Artifacts are the large items.
Right.
We have archives. Archives are the documents. And then we have photographs, which are self-explanatory. And I'm sure that when our trustees see this, they will come back and they will tell me what I have forgotten.
Another big piece for the History Museum is collaboration and working closely with other like-minded organizations, folks that want to be a part of the History Museum. A big collaboration is happening as we speak.
And that is our agreement that we reached with the Valentonetti Puppet Museum for them to lease space in our museum. What this does is it brings two museums together under one roof. We continue operating as separate organizations, but one thing that we saw was that a lot of our visitors are stopping as they're en route from the Olympic Peninsula to catch the ferry to go back to Seattle. And they get to the area, they have 45 minutes to an hour, they'd visit our museum, we would mention the Puppet Museum was just down the street, they'd say, oh, we don't have time to go visit. And in talking with the folks at the Puppet Museum, they were also seeing, okay, folks visiting there. They'd mentioned the History Museum, oh, we don't have time to go visit. So what this does is it brings two organizations with different but with complementary missions together in the same building. It also provides some financial benefit to both organizations.
Exactly. So you'll see when you come into the History Museum, Pinocchio greets you right at the front door, and he is huge. And it's a really welcome addition to this museum.
So,
yeah, that's great. So another collaboration, and in our next segment, is the history of water in Bremerton. So tell us a little bit about that, but we're going to learn a lot more from Kathleen.
Kathleen Cahall is a former trustee of the Historical Society, and shortly after I was hired, she just floated the idea on how would we feel about hosting an exhibit for the City of Bremerton, recognizing the centennial of the city's ownership of the water system. That happens to be this year, 2017, and Kathleen will be able to fill you in on that exhibit.
It's a great exhibit, and we're going to talk about that in our next segment. Meanwhile, we want to remind you, Kitsap County History Museum is at 284th Street, beautiful downtown Bremerton. It's a very cool old building. Lots of good things to see for children, for folks new to this community. If you like history, even if you don't, it's really a very, very cool spot. Please check out their Facebook page. We want to thank Dean for being with us today. Great job. And stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to talk to Kathleen Cahall about our city's water system and their 100th anniversary. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside Bremerton. Now we're in this big classroom space at the Kitsap Historic History Museum. I want to make sure I say it right. Kitsap County History Museum on 4th Street. And we're at this fabulous display. And joining me for this segment is my friend Kathleen Cahall. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Shar.
Kathleen is our Water Resources Manager for the City of Bremerton. What does that mean, Kathleen?
Well, Water Resources Division in the water utility, we manage the water supply and the water treatment. We take care of all the reservoirs and the pump stations and make sure that all that good clean water gets to people's homes.
That's excellent. You've worked for the city for quite a long time, my friend.
Yes, going on 26 years.
26 years. Kathleen is a water professional. She went to school to be in a biology degree. Is that what you mentioned, Kathleen? She is extremely devoted to our drinking water and the water system in our city of Bremerton. And do you know how fortunate we are to own our own water system? We are very fortunate.
Very special.
It's very, very special. Kathleen, tell us about, our city was incorporated in 1901, so we had our centennial in 2001. 2017, we're celebrating the centennial of our water system.
Right.
Pretty cool, and
Right.
You've done a fabulous display here. Let's
you.
talk a little bit about it. But first, we want to hear the value of water. Sorry, I jumped a little bit ahead.
Oh, that's all right. But there are few things more important in our daily lives or to the vitality of our community than safe drinking water. And it's something that it's easy to take for granted, but worldwide there are 2 billion, with a B, people that do not have access to safe drinking water. But in our community, it's available 24 hours a day. So that's something very special that we need to think about, and that's kind of the purpose of our exhibit and our celebration of the water system, is to remind people about the importance of this great resource we have.
What we take for granted. We turn on the spigot, we turn on our hose, we turn on the shower, and the water's available for us. Kathleen, how many people are served by our city water system?
Well, in Bremerton system, there are 55,000 people, plus the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, so they are our largest customer.
I bet.
So a lot of things that happen at the shipyard throughout history have affected the water system.
And it is very, very important. Kathleen had an interesting statistic that I heard her mention off camera about cell phones and toilets. Give us that comparison.
Well, in the world, there are more people that own cell phones than have toilets. Again, another statistic to remind people how lucky we are in the United States and in our community to have good drinking water and good, safe sanitation facilities. We're very fortunate to have those things. Other people in parts of the world don't have those.
Don't even have it. They might have to, women or children mostly, would have to hike, take a long walk to get water and carry it back to their camp, their home, their hut, wherever they live in. If you're involved in a Rotary club like I am, Kathleen's involved in Seroptimus, these organizations are committed to worldwide activities that help people get water and have clean drinking water. It's a major focus of Rotary, major focus.
Yeah, lots of humanitarian groups, and that's a good thing for people if you want to do something to help somebody else, help them get safe drinking water. It's a great way to do that.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on this, number one, this really beautiful display. This is the back room of the History Museum. And Kathleen, how long will this display be up for citizens to come look at?
So the exhibit on the drinking water history will be here through April 7th through the end of September 2017.
Excellent, excellent. So you've got a lot of time. Please come down and check it out. But if you don't have a chance to do that, Kathleen's going to tell us all about it. So Kathleen, let's start with this.
Oh, we'll start with this. Well, Shar, as you mentioned, the city has been around since 1901, and back then the water came from springs that just popped out of the ground, or very shallow wells. And the population was only about 2,000 maybe roughly, and it was a very rough and tumble western town. And then again, with the shipyard needing water and the town getting bigger, a private system started a small water system, And that occurred until until the city purchased the water system in 1917. But this is wooden pipe. So
This is wood.
This is wood. So back in the old days, real old days, water pipes were made out of wood. Either they would bore a hole through a log, or they would put what we have here, wood stave pipe. So there's strips of pipe that they would attach with wire and then coat it with a protectant, usually a creosote. So sometimes these don't smell too good, but so that was very common throughout the United States until the about 1920s. And we have one of the photographs we have in the exhibit is some of our distribution people putting in wood stave pipe. So sometimes when we put in a new pipe or we're digging in some construction, we run across some of this old pipe, and they're really good about cutting me off a piece and bringing me a wood stave. This is a smaller one. We have some larger ones, but this is one of the things that we have in our exhibit at the museum.
It's very cool, and it really caught my eye, so I'm really glad you were able to show us.
I said it there.
Great. So Kathleen, let's talk about, what is on display here, and let's talk about the history of our water system, because it's huge, 100 years of having our own system.
Right. Well, the city wanted to purchase the water system in 1912, but ran into some difficulty with the franchise agreement, so it went to court. And it ended up in the Washington State Supreme Court before they could work out all the ins and outs of that agreement, and the city could purchase the water system in 1917, and it cost $225,000.
That's a lot of money.
It was, back in if you convert that to 2017 dollars, that's about $4 million. But it bought entire water system, so that's a pretty good deal. Well, from the get-go, the water system needed a lot of maintenance and a lot of improvements. Again, with the World War I, the shipyard was doing a lot of work. They needed water. We had folks coming in to support that war effort, so we needed more water. So the first water system for the city was some of the small creeks in the area, streams, so Gorse Creek, Anderson Creek in the Port Orchard area, Charleston Creek, those were our first sources. So that was pretty good. We were able to move along. During the Depression era, we had some help from the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. They rebuilt actually, what we call Pump Station 1, and that's out at Jarstead Park. So some folks that might use Jarstead Park might see that old building there. It was built in 1934 by the WPA. It is no longer in use. We would love to do something with that historic building. Of course, funding is always an issue, but that's something in the future we would like to do. So then the next phase of our water system in the city of Bremerton also is then during the 1940s in support of World War II. And in the 40s, the population of Bremerton went from 30,000 people to 80,000 people, which is amazing. We're at about 40,000 people right now. So in the mid-40s, 80,000 people were here. The shipyard was going, gangbusters, round the clock, supporting the war effort. Our water use skyrocketed along with the population. So we needed something more than these small streams for drinking water. So that's when the city first put in groundwater wells, and we put those in near Anderson Creek. We still use those wells today. They were installed in the 1940s. They are some of our biggest groundwater supplies. So that was started in the 40s. Today we have about 12 wells that we use for our drinking water. So that was during the 40s.
You hear stories from the 40s when literally Bremerton went from 40,000 to 80,000. People sharing beds. So a person would sleep during the day, then go to work. So somebody then would get off the day shift, go to sleep, or the night shift. There was really creative ways of fitting 80,000 people into our town. And people were working. And if you could imagine, sometimes we think, oh, this traffic jam getting out of Bremerton. Could you imagine 80,000 people here?
Hard to
It's
imagine.
amazing. It's just really amazing. But please continue, Kathleen.
All right, so we'll enter the 1950s. We had a water superintendent, Cliff Cassad, and we kind of consider him our most famous water employee from the past, him the father of our modern day water system here in Bremerton. But he was a person of such amazing vision and foresight. And it was through his vision that he planned to have a surface water system on the Union River. So the city had purchased that property. There had been a large fire in that area in the 30s. And he had a dam built. So that is Cassad Dam. The city named the dam after Cliff Cassad. And that is our surface water supply that today serves about 60% of our water. So about 60% of our water is the surface water from the Union River, and the 40% now comes from our groundwater wells.
How was the dam built? Was it funded by the federal government? Or
No,
the city funded it?
City funded it through bonds. It cost in 1957 $2 million. That today is equivalent to about $20 million, which is a lot of money, but we don't think we could build the dam of our size and caliber today, even if you had $20 million. It would be a very much a larger amount of money and a much bigger project. We are very fortunate in Bremerton to have that surface water supply and to own the watershed around it. That's very critical.
Extremely critical and extremely guarded by our water resources employees. Not many people get to go up there. If you get to go see the dam, which BCAT did in, holy moly, I think that was 5 or 6 years ago, absolutely phenomenal. And then the watershed, Kathleen, how many acres are there?
Well, 3,000 acres in the Union River watershed. Now, the water utility in Bremerton owns about 8,000 acres of forestry land. We own that land because, like I mentioned, some of those watersheds used to be used for water supply. We don't use those anymore, but we have wells in that area. So we have 8,000 acres. 3,000 is a Union River watershed, but we protect it so closely because we are one of the few unfiltered water systems in the country. And the way we're able to stay unfiltered is we protect that water system, the watershed, and don't allow any recreation or other activities that could impact the water quality. So it's really important. Those trees and that forest acts as our water treatment, essentially. So it's something that's, again, very special. It helps keep our water quality as good as we can get it. It's essentially the rain that falls out of the sky into that reservoir, and that's what we're drinking. We do have to disinfect it, but we don't have to do much else. And because the elevation of the reservoir is so much higher, several hundred feet above where it comes in the city, then that water comes into town by gravity, so we don't have to pump it. So we like our surface water. It helps keep our water rates low. In the 1970s, that was a big era for drinking water systems of regulation.
Okay.
So in 1974, there was the Safe Drinking Water Act. That's a federal regulation that protects public health and ensures that water systems follow very specific rules and regulations. We test the water for lots of different things and make sure that we protect public health. And that in Washington State is handled by the Washington State Department of Health. We work very closely with our regulators to ensure safe drinking water.
Great.
And part of how we do that, so our water quality is great, but it is required to be disinfected, and we do that with chlorine, and we used chlorine for many years. That does a great job, but in the mid-1990s, there was some regulations that were passed that for unfiltered drinking water systems, we had to add an additional disinfection. So in 2011, we installed what you were referring to, which is our ultraviolet treatment plant, and that does use ultraviolet light to help disinfect the water. It's very effective. And we're very fortunate that treatment system was purchased. That was funded by the federal government through stimulus funding. The city got two stimulus grants. We got $6 million for the water system to put in ultraviolet, and then our sewer utility received $6 million to add sewers to the Gorst area, a place where that was a very big environmental impact. So we were very fortunate to receive that federal funding.
Kathleen, does somebody go out to the dam and put their eyes on the dam, checking it every day?
Every day we do that, and it's folks from the water utility. Some of that is water resources, some of that is for our forestry division. We also have patrols that are performed by the police department. Again, that's a very good collaborative agreement we have there with our Bremerton Police Department. So they're out there. So if people are trespassing or doing things they ought not out there, they will encounter potentially the police that will see to it that they don't do that.
Yeah, you get in trouble.
Yes.
Don't do it. Because really it is so pristine and
that's your drinking water.
And it's
you
our
don't want to do
drinking
anything
water.
to mess that up.
You know, we really want to really protect it. So where have we come since 2011, Kathleen?
Well, 100 years later, we have the theme for our 100-year centennial is from a visionary past to an inspired future. We get lots of inspiration from those that went before us that made such good decisions and had such foresight and vision. So we hope that we carry that on to the future, and to the folks that come after us will have that same inspiration.
Kathleen, you do such a great job, and we want to commend your intern because I know you had help putting this exhibit
the
up.
exhibit, yes.
Yeah, it's just very good.
That's Nick. I'll put a little word in for Nick,
nice
our
job.
intern. Yes.
Nice job, Nick. You can see valves in the room. You see maps. You see now everything is pretty much digital. Is that electronic per se? Can you check meters and check things?
Yes, a lot of things are digital. So one of the exhibits, and this is our distribution people put together a beautiful exhibit on our water meters and kind of the history of water meters. And in the old days, they had to manually check them and walk house to house. And now we're able to do that through radio signals. Right now we drive through and gather those signals, and we're looking in the future that we can have one antenna and can check people's water use just remotely. Then in the water system, my folks, we use a remote system to measure a lot of the water quality measurements can be done remotely and get information on the levels of reservoirs and pumps that are running, and we can manage a lot of those things remotely.
Thanks for joining us on Inside Bremerton. Our water utility is so important, and drinking water is so important. I want to thank Kathleen, our Water Resources Manager. But before we go, Kathleen, there's a big award that our utility received. Tell us about it.
Right, so we're very excited. Our water utility was presented with a Source Water Protection Award from the American Water Works Association. This is a national recognition of Bremerton's exemplary protection of its water supply. So we're very proud as the water utility. It takes all the employees in the water utility to make that work, and we're very grateful for that recognition. Thank you.
Well done, well done. We want to thank the Kitsap History Museum for hosting us today. We talked to Dean Tingey, awesome resource at your museum. And also please come and see our display on our 100th anniversary of our water system for the city. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.